Hi, I'm Russell Burke. I'm from the Department of Biology at Hofstra University. And we're here today to shoot a video to demonstrate to people how to do the surveys for the cysts on the snails that we can use to census for terrapins. So today we're just going to run through the procedures, make it really simple, show you how simple it is, and hopefully you'll be able to follow very well.
Hi, I'm Jason Williams from Hofstra University. I'm going to tell you about how we're going to collect for the parasites that are on the mud snails. And so what we're going to do is look at the mud snails at about every meter along a mud flat like you see here. So if you're in an area where there's many mud snails like we have here at Jamaica Bay, you'll be able to get about 100 mud snails, which is what you need to verify whether the parasite is here or not. Now what you're actually going to be looking for is the parasite on the mud snail shell or the operculum. The operculum is the protective structure that covers over the foot when the snail withdraws in. So you're looking for an external stage of the parasite, but in fact there's an internal stage of the parasite that's the asexual stage in the snail. And the snail is the intermediate host. The definitive host for the parasite is the terrapin. So you can use this parasite as a proxy for whether the terrapins are in the region or not. So what we're going to do is go down along this mud flat and sample about 5 to 10 mud snails every few feet and put them in a bucket. And then we'll sit down and I'll tell you how to actually look for the individual cysts that are on the snails. Okay, so we're collecting the snails now. I have a bucket. You can use any bucket. 5-gallon bucket is nice. We have a little bit of seawater that we've collected in the bottom of the bucket, and that's good to get off all the sand that's on the snails because that can get in the way of examining them for these cysts. So we're going along, and I'm going to collect 5 snails at one site and just drop them in the bucket and then move on to the next site. So just a few steps, a meter or so apart, and we'll collect more snails. And I'm just doing this haphazardly. We're not looking for any type of snail, just collecting the mud snails. Okay, so here we are, and we're examining the snails now that we've collected for the cysts of the trematode parasite. So we want to measure a couple things about the snails first, and then we'll examine the snails for the actual parasite. So we're going to take these snails one at a time, and it's good to have a little bit of the water in the bottom of the bucket, the seawater, so you can rinse them off. And we're going to have our data sheets handy, and also something to measure them with. You could use calipers like this, or you could use a millimeter ruler if you don't have calipers. We're going to do 2 measurements. We're going to do the total length, which is from the apex of the shell down to the end here, and measure that. So this one is 13.3. We're going to record that as the total length. And then we're going to record the aperture length. The aperture length is the opening through which the foot is extended of the snail. So with the calipers you can use the other side and get the internal measurement for the aperture, and this is 5.8 millimeters. Everything in millimeters. And those are the 2 length measurements for the snails. So that's all you need in terms of measurements, but now we're going to quantify and determine if the parasites are found on the snails. And so for this, you can use a magnifying glass, or if you have magnifying goggles, you can use that. And what we're going to do is use the magnifying glass and check the operculum and see if that has any cysts on it. Now these are a pearly like cyst. rounded that are cemented down on that structure or on the shell. So we're going to look both at that covering on the foot, I don't see any there, and then all over the shell. And I do not see any. The cysts could be confused with sand if the shell had adhering sand, but since you've rinsed it off, that's unlikely. If you think it's sand, you could do a little brush and it would come off, the cysts won't. So now that we're done with that snail, you can drop it down. If you're away from where you originally collected, you can put them in a bucket and then transfer them down, however you want to do it. You can also take them back to the lab and do it under a dissecting microscope. So I'm just going to record that no cyst on snail and no cysts on the operculum. And that's how you do it. You'll keep picking up the snails and measuring and go through your 100 snails. If you get through your 100 snails and do not find any of the parasites, the ideal situation is that you could do another collection, because to verify that they're truly not there, 100 isn't enough. But 100 is a good starting point for a project like this. So we've collected the snails now, and we've found about a dozen or so with the cysts. The cysts are a little hard to see, especially with this camera, so we're going to take them back to the lab and show you what they look like under the dissecting microscope. And the other thing that you want to be thinking about, and that is on the data sheets, is that the snails may lack the operculum, that protective cover on the foot. If they don't have an operculum, then they can't have the cysts on that region, because the cysts won't adhere to the foot. They would only be found on the operculum or the shell. So if you find one that's withdrawn in and lacks an operculum, just record that on the data sheet. And we'll take them back to the lab and take a look.